G'day from course 20. Whilst mental illnesses don't discriminate, research tells us that certain sectors of our population are at higher risk of depression and suicide. Officially, around 2,500 suicides are recorded each year, but we know that's about 30% lower than real figures. With stats like this, it's likely you'll come across a family member, work colleague or friend who could do with your support. Maybe you've got a son who's struggling with alcohol, drugs, sexuality, loneliness or a lost relationship. Perhaps you're caring for an older relative who's feeling isolated or struggling to access appropriate support. You might have a neighbour with an existing mental illness, experiencing a family breakdown, unemployed or disengaged. Maybe you know a farmer struggling through drought, financial hardship or other stressful life events.
Mental health in Indigenous communities is a significant problem. We have huge rates of Indigenous suicide, depression, transgenerational trauma, just communities that are really, really sad.
In the last 12 months we would have had 20 funerals from suicide. There is a deep sadness.
I'm from a farm, I have a middle-aged husband and I felt I wasn't really listening to him and addressing his needs. Basically I didn't know how, so even though I work, an occupational therapist.
Unfortunately, many people have trouble understanding depression. Often we notice changes in those close to us or sense that something isn't quite right, but we aren't sure how to start the conversation. So we say nothing or vaguely intimate that something has changed. Besides the personal struggle, depressed people have to deal with other people's perceptions of depression. Social stigma often translates into inaccurate stereotypes, the end result being that people fight depression on their own instead of seeking help. Suicide can be prevented. Most suicidal people don't want to die, they simply don't want to live with the pain they're currently experiencing. Don't underestimate your abilities to help a suicidal person. Openly talking about suicidal thoughts and feelings can save a life. This resource gives you basic tips to start a conversation about depression and suicide. It's not a substitute for professional support, but rather some practical tips that may make a huge difference in the life of someone you care about. If you are concerned somebody may be at risk of suicide, start a conversation about your concerns. Don't worry about the exact wording. Try not to be leading or judgmental. Listen with patience and compassion. The conversation may seem one-sided. Don't feel you have to fill in the silences or fix the situation unless they're asking for specific help. If you're sincere in your desire to help and comfort, that will come through. You might start with something like, "I'm sorry you're in so much pain. I'm here to support you." Or, "I may not be able to understand exactly how you feel, but I care about you and I want to help. I wanted to check in with you because you haven't seemed yourself lately."
One thing that I've learnt over the years is that it's really important to get to know people. And to get to know people, you really need to provide opportunity for them to feel comfortable, to build up trust by listening to people. Often when you do provide this space, people will talk to you about more than just how things are going on the farm. Often you'll learn a whole lot more, and I think it's really important to recognise that within our rural communities, people like myself often play much more of an important role than what we realise, and by simply listening to people can actually really help them.
Hey Unc, how you going? What have you been up to? Haven't seen you around. Catching any fish? Looking a bit down, Uncle, what's going on? Tell me your story. Or if it's my son, he's angrier than normal and he's not telling me why and he's not eating. Sometimes it's not what they say, it's not what they want, it's what they're not saying. Read it all, pay attention. Bye.
Hopefully if I notice somebody was struggling, by being able to build a relationship with, talking about our industry, whether it's the rain or the cattle prices or whatever, hopefully that will allow them to build a relationship that then I am comfortable to encourage them to seek help.
Be aware of things that put people at greater risk of suicide. For instance, a mental illness, poor physical health, a history of suicide attempts, bad things that have happened recently, childhood physical or sexual abuse, or belonging to an at-risk group like men, Indigenous people, the unemployed, prisoners, and gay, lesbian and bisexual people. Describe the things that have caused you concern. The Mental Health First Aid Action Plan is a simple and effective tool to use. The A asks you to approach, assess and assist with any crisis. Be direct with your questions. For example, you could ask, are you having thoughts of suicide? Or, are you thinking about killing yourself? If the answer is yes, then ask whether they have a plan. How, where, when, if they've felt suicidal before, and whether they have been using drugs or alcohol, because intoxication can increase the risk of a person acting on suicidal thoughts. If you're unable to make a connection with the person, help them to find someone else to talk to. The L reminds you to listen non-judgmentally. Tune in to what's really happening. Look at the verbal and the non-verbal cues. Each situation is different and everyone has their own story and culture. Pay attention. The G refers to giving support and information. Be solution focused. Know what's available in your local area or how and where to access reliable information online and over the phone. The E reminds them to seek help. Encourage them to seek appropriate professional help as early as possible. This might be their GP, a counsellor, psychologist, mental health nurse, or any appropriate allied health professionals. The final E empowers them to seek other supports. Lots of things fall into this category. Talking to others with similar experiences, community networks like social and sporting groups, self-help strategies around good sleep practices, a healthy diet, exercise, minimising drugs and alcohol. Really, it's anything that brings joy, connectedness, and builds resilience.